So for today's movie review, I'll be reviewing the 2005 sci-fi action thriller Stealth. Now, as far as production details are concerned, supposedly when this was originally written, it was conceived as a live-action adaptation of the Nintendo video game Star Fox, which to me is kind of insane. But I'm also taking this bit of information with a grain of salt since I can't seem to find any other bit of information backing up this claim. But as production progressed, the script would later get rewritten as Warrior, which would have been about a single pilot who would attempt to battle this high-tech fighter drone that malfunctioned, resulting in it wiping out an entire squadron. But I think as production continued, Rob Cohen, the same guy who directed everything from Dragonheart, The Fast and the Furious XXX, and some movies after this consisting of The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor, along with The Hurricane Heist, would step in as the director for this movie, resulting in the movie getting, yet again, another script rewrite, taking on the form of the movie we eventually ended up getting. And fun fact, supposedly, the director of this movie cited the Japanese mecha anime Macross, or Robotech here in the United States, as a source of inspiration for the movie. Again, taking this bit of information with a grain of salt. Anywho, after production wrapped up and the movie premiered, Stealth would go on to not only receive negative reception from the critics, but it also performed poorly at the box office, earning $76.9 million against a budget of $135 million at the box office, resulting in it becoming one of the biggest box office bombs of all time. And not only that, but I also put this movie in the same ballpark as Sky Captain and The World of Tomorrow, in that sense where I definitely remember the advertising to the movie, but after it premiered, it just faded into obscurity, not to be seen or heard from again, until I happened to arrive at a antique shop, the same antique shop that I rediscovered Sky Captain at, also contained a DVD copy of Stealth, making this the overall third review I've done in which I found a movie in an antique shop and decided to do a review of it later, with the first two movies being Sky Captain and The World of Tomorrow, along with Murder Party. But anywho, is Stealth a movie that's worth watching, or should it have been forgotten by the sands of time? As for the plot of the movie, the U.S. Navy develops a top-secret weapon in the form of a stealth bomber piloted by an artificial intelligence referred to as the Extreme Deep Invader, or Eddie for short. And upon one test flight, after getting hit by a lightning bolt, Eddie goes haywire and starts to develop a mind of its own, resulting in Eddie going rogue. And now it's up to the combined forces of three ace pilots to destroy the rogue jet before it has an opportunity to ignite an all-out war. Now, in terms of what I liked about the movie, I actually thought the movie had some really great cinematography during certain scenes. Everything from the various crane shots we see aboard the aircraft carrier to some of the more scenic shots of the landscapes we see when our three leads are in Thailand for a bit. And speaking of Thailand, another aspect of the movie I liked is that entire sequence altogether. For the first few minutes, there is no lines of dialogue. It is just visual storytelling in that sense, where you have the camera linger on our characters just interacting with the environment for several minutes, and you're seeing their reaction to their environment. And there's no lines of dialogue, no internal monologue, or even having some music play in the background that's supposed to convey their thoughts. No, it's just letting the scene play out, and you understand everything in a visual sense. And not only that, but Thailand itself looks pretty great looking. Again, going off what I was saying about the cinematography, the cameramen really did a good job of showcasing the geographic locations of the Philippines itself. Everything from having Jamie Foxx's character looking at a couple stone statues at the bottom of a staircase, to having our other two leads exploring a beautiful waterfall, which I bet was probably the most memorable scene in this movie when it came out at the time, given that you got to see the actress Jessica Biel wearing a blue bikini during that sequence, even if it is for a couple seconds. Another aspect of the movie I liked are some of the scene transitions, especially especially this one that occurs during the first third where you have our three main characters going on their test run with Eddie for the first time, and you see them flying over the ocean. The camera continues to pan downwards towards the ocean itself. And as you continue to see the camera panning along with the ocean, suddenly this giant foot steps on the ground, and suddenly we're within the corridors of the aircraft carrier, focused on someone walking towards the control room that's monitoring the experiment. And the first time I saw this scene, it caught me off guard because I wasn't expecting a scene transition to be that creative for this kind of movie. Another aspect of the movie I liked is Eddie itself, in regards to the practical effects, because this movie does have some hybridization to it in that sense where Eddie's depicted both using a practical effect and a CG model, but the CG model is only used during the points in time where you see Eddie flying, and the CGI for Eddie is pretty janky, which I'll talk about later. But as far as a practical effect is concerned, my god, I was not expecting there to be a 2-scale life-size model of Eddie for this movie. Sure, it's only used when Eddie is grounded and you see the characters inspecting it, but the fact that the film crew went out of their way to make a life-size model of the jet itself is something that I can appreciate in that sense, where by having this big practical effect, it adds a sense of tangibility to this particular world, since it's not supposed to take place in the same vein as something like the Avenger movies. It's supposed to be set in our world. That and the actual design for the drone itself looks pretty cool. Another aspect of the movie I liked are the action scenes when you do have our main cast of characters taking part in aerial dogfights, no matter if it's with Eddie or jets from some other country. An aspect of the movie I have mixed feelings about is Jamie Foxx, because on the one hand, he's definitely the most entertaining part of the movie, but my biggest problem with him is, well, actually, before I even get into the problem proper, I have to tell a little story, because the first time I even was introduced to Jamie Foxx as an actor properly was back in 2012 with the release of Django Unchained. And since then, I've been seeing him in other movies, playing roles such as Motherfucker Jones from Horrible Bosses to Electro in the Spider-Man movies. But when I found this movie, I had no idea he was even in it, which is funny because supposedly around the time of this movie's release, a lot of the advertising was heavily focused on Jamie Foxx's character, because the year before, Jamie Foxx played Ray Charles in the biopic Ray, which earned him an Oscar, so a lot of the advertising from the trailers to the posters really focused a lot on his character, to such a point that even when you look at the poster that I have here for this review, his character is dead center, so you're under the impression he's the main character, which I find to be hilarious, because like I stated at the beginning of this review, I do remember the advertising for the movie, but I remember more the action scenes that occur within the advertising as opposed to the actors. But why I'm bringing this all up, Stealth basically pulled a 2014 Godzilla before the 2014 Godzilla movie even existed, in that sense where the advertising really highlights this one actor who you think is going to be a major player or the main character, only for that main character to get killed off at some point in the movie. So, in short, he's an entertaining part of the movie. It's just the advertising surrounding him was very misleading in that sense. And not only that, but the way he gets killed off was very anticlimactic in that sense where, on the one hand, yes, you don't see it coming, but on the other hand, it was just like, really? It just didn't feel earned is my problem with it. Now, in terms of what I dislike about the movie, the first major problem I have with the movie is the CGI, because to me, while it might have been passable for the time period, it does not hold up very well by today's standards. For my simple reason that the CGI looks like a cinematic cutscene from a PS2 video game, which to me is bad, because remember, this movie also came out the same year that Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire The Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, along with the Peter Jackson remake of King Kong. And not only is the CGI featured in those movies really good, but it still holds up very well by today's standards, while the CGI in this movie, on the other hand, does not. Another problem that I have with the movie is the incoherent writing during the last third of the movie, because there's points in time where the main character lands at this base in Alaska, and suddenly the doctor at this base tries to kill him for some reason. I never understood why this guy tried to kill him. And not only that, but as the scene progressed, it turns out all of these people who work at this Alaskan base also are trying to kill him too for some reason. I never understood that within the context of the movie because that was never properly explained. I was like, I had to look up the Wikipedia synopsis that put things into perspective. And not only that, but this happens more than once throughout the movie in that sense where just shit happens and I don't understand, like, why is it happening? It just felt like we go from point A to point D and we miss like point B and C. Another problem that I have with the movie is the actual narrative itself in terms of the execution. Because on pen and paper, you have 3 human pilots battling a really advanced drone piloted by an artificial intelligence that's going out of its way to destroy potential enemies that could potentially start World War III. That should have been your movie, because it sounds like Top Gun versus the Terminator. But instead we get Top Gun meets Short Circuit behind enemy lines instead. Another problem that I have with the movie is the humor. Sure, there's not a whole lot of it in the movie, but there are a few points in time where when you do have a character say or do something stupid that's supposed to be intentionally funny, it's just not funny. Another problem that I have with the movie is that the people who created Eddie in the first place make the dumbest decision when it came to having Eddie go on a test flight with our 3 main characters. Because the whole idea behind this test flight is so that Eddie can learn the flight maneuvers of each and every single pilot. And before we even get the test flight, it's established that our main character of Lieutenant Gannon has been known to break the rules. And during the test flight, when it eventually becomes a real mission, we see him breaking the rules. And remember, Eddie is supposed to learn the maneuvers to each of these pilots, so it's also learn the maneuvers to the main character as well. Meaning that our main character, in some shape or form, was a bad influence for Eddie, which would only get worse once it got hit by lightning and started to have a mind of its own for the remainder of the movie. And for the final problem I have with the movie is the ending itself, for 2 reasons. Reason number 1, I thought the way Eddie was handled or destroyed was very anticlimactic and came out of nowhere. Because during the last third, there's a point in time where our main character forms a sort of truce with Eddie for reasons, and the 2 of them decide to go to North Korea to rescue one of our other main characters who was stranded there during their ensuing battle. And there is a moment where a helicopter from the Korean People's Army is about to shoot up our 2 leads, but Eddie decides to sacrifice itself by ramming into this helicopter, destroying both it along with the helicopter. And this just came out of freaking nowhere. Now sure, there is a point in time where we do see the person who created the artificial intelligence going through the coding and discovering that there's this particular code that Eddie says that it may or may not be feeling something, implying that Eddie now developed feelings, but it's a blink and you miss it kind of moment. As is, having Eddie sacrifice itself to this helicopter to save our 2 lead characters does not feel satisfying or earned in that respect. And the other problem that I have with the ending is literally the final minute. But before I can even discuss the final minute, for a majority of the runtime, our 2 lead characters of Lieutenant Gannon and Lieutenant Wade are slowly developing feelings for each other. And during the final minute of the movie, Lieutenant Gannon awkwardly expresses feelings of love towards Lieutenant Wade. And the way she reacts to all this, she goes, "Really? That's the way you guys say it? You're just gonna say it like that and not kiss me?" And the moment moment she says that, the credits start to roll. And to me, this was the most awkward way to end the movie. Because it doesn't really end properly, it just ends abruptly. Because if I had to describe the way it ends, it almost feels as if the cinematographer just kept rolling with the camera and caught some footage of the actual actress just reacting to the scene itself in like a very jokey kind of manner that was more poking fun at the movie itself. So for my final verdict of Stealth, the movie, for me, falls into the category of it has a good idea on pen and paper, but was never executed to its fullest potential. Because the movie, while I don't think it had a great start, it had a good start for the first several minutes. It's not until the actual AI jet goes haywire in which I think the movie goes downhill and progressively gets worse and worse as it goes. And the more I think about it, I start to understand as to why this movie ended up becoming a forgotten relic among the sands of time. So overall, Stealth is a movie that crash lands as opposed to flying high in the skies. And before I give my final rating, what did everyone else have to say about Stealth? So it looked like the movie got generally mediocre reception. And so for my final rating of Stealth, I give it a 2 out of 5. Did anyone read that one news article from BBC called Combat Drone to Compete Against Piloted Plane and find it really funny, given that the entire article was essentially the plot basis for this kind of movie? And see you later.